Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Editor-in-Chief of Arab News, Faisal Abbas, and his panelists, His Excellency Osama Al-Absi, Amadou Diallo, Shiv Kemka, and Luis Alberto Moreno.
Well, almost good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure to be moderating this session. My name is Faisal Abbas. I'm the editor-in-chief of the regional leading English language daily Arab news based in Saudi Arabia. And I'll be moderating a session today entitled Empowering the People. We heard last night at the opening remarks from Muhammad Al-Abbar about the resilience of the people in the Middle East, whether it's about navigating the extreme politics or extreme weather that we have in this region. We've also seen an impressive, detailed economic plan being unveiled, of course, pending the political solution and the participation of both parties. However, as we all know, roads, projects, energy, education, economical chances do not do it on their own. We need the people. This is why I believe this session is of utmost importance. And here to share insight with us are perhaps some of the world experts coming from practical experience as well. We have to my left His Excellency Osama Al-Absi, the CEO of the labor market regulatory body here in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Luis Alberto Moreno, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank. Amadou Diallo, the CEO of DHL Global Forwarding for the Middle East and Africa. And last but certainly not least, Shiv Kemka, who's the vice chairman of the Sun Group in India. Gentlemen, welcome to this session. Luis, let's start with you. When we were discussing with the other panelists last night, it seems to me you actually have an advantage because you've been to the Palestinian territories. You've experienced the way people live firsthand. And this was about recently, about 2 years ago. So just to set the stage, could you shed some light about the way the Palestinian people live at the moment? And how likely are they, from your experience, to welcome what could be perceived as a Western opportunity? Is the trust ready to welcome such an initiative?
Well, let me first thank you for having us and thank Jared for this great initiative. There's a lot of work behind a plan like this. And frankly, I went as a tourist and I went for a day and a half, so that doesn't make you an expert on anything. But what I did see is, first of all, going to the religious sites, and especially for a Catholic, going to Bethlehem is a very big and a very emotional thing. But equally, I went to Nablus, and I saw in Nablus a school that had about 400 girls and boys, focused fundamentally in the poorest, and developing a whole set of skills. And you know, one of the things that you find throughout the developing world is that typically in schools, you have children going for very few hours. And it is those hours where they don't have other activities that then there is a tension, of course, to go and do violent things. We've seen that in many Latin American countries where we work. And here, for instance, we've used soccer as a way to do integration, where, yes, there is a huge passion for soccer, but it's how people play together by the rules. And so I saw that in the school is the use of sports, the use of music, which is equally important to bring talent in people and use their God-given talents in a better way. And I saw also a city called Ramawi, maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's really like a brand new city that is being built that even looks at the different religions. And then I went to a market where you see a lot of the tension that takes place and a lot of the violence. So you see the two sides of the equation. But clearly, I mean, this at the end, a plan like this is as good as the people who are willing to implement them. And the more important thing in any case is the political will to get behind something where people will eventually really build the potential for developing their own country.
Let me take Shiv's input here. Provided, assuming that there is the political will on both parties, you have tremendous experience under your belt. You come from the private sector. So my question is to you, is there an appetite, at least from your end and from the private sector, to help create these opportunities for the Palestinian people? Or would you say that perhaps you're still on the fence?
First of all, again, I'd like to say thank you for having us here and this incredible vision. Jared Kushner and Secretary Mnuchin, when I came here, I didn't know what to expect, but I'm deeply moved and deeply inspired by the idealistic and slightly optimistic, but hopefully doable and achievable vision that's coalescing here. We come from a country where actually the problem doesn't seem very large. Because in India we have 1.3 billion people. We need to create 1.3 million jobs a month for the next 30 years. And we have extreme poverty and wealth. We have all kinds of conflict, all kinds of issues. And I think if you start off with your assumption, if the political will is there, then I think there's no reason at all why this plan can't succeed. So we work globally. We would be very willing to come and work and to help and support in whatever way we can. I think it's almost a perfect example of where the world can come together and try and solve a problem that if you can solve it here, you can solve it anywhere. People come to India and say, how do you all drive on the streets of India? If you can drive on the streets of India, you can drive anywhere. Similarly, if we can solve this problem, we could probably solve anything on the planet. So we're very excited to support and help in any way we can.
I've just visited India and experienced driving, so yes. I can only second your opinion there. Amado, you told me that throughout your career, you've dealt with many Palestinian refugees in Africa as well as in Europe. You described them as extremely entrepreneurial. And so I'm just curious if you have any success stories or any aspirational stories that you've seen firsthand. But also, does the same apply, you think, to Palestinians living in their home country or home territories? Or do you think the conditions might have been more favorable, for example, in Europe and in Africa?
First of all, I also want to reiterate the same thing. Thanks for the opportunity to listen to the program that is quite impressive that was presented yesterday. Yeah, so our organization works everywhere across the globe, and the purpose of Deutsche Post DHL is actually called connecting people and improving lives. And what it means in detail, so I have had the opportunity to work in Asia, the opportunity to work in Europe in many different places, and now since 1.5 years, I'm a newcomer here in the region, and I also experience similar sort of vibes from the people. Now, when it comes to what has been discussed before, because I have to connect it a little bit, we took some examples in Rwanda. There was some example given yesterday about Singapore. We operate here since quite a number of years in Bahrain. And one common theme that I've seen in countries that are being extremely successful is they all have some sort of economic development board, where they develop a vision, which is touching multiple sectors, and then there's a high discipline in implementing those. Now, and that is the experience that I have personally lived in across all of these countries, seeing how it impacts improving the lives of people that are living in those communities. So I've been living in Germany, in France, and UK, working there, and also now here in the region. And I say that, from my experience, I've been also while I was studying, exposed to a lot of Palestinians, and I was always impressed by the level of entrepreneurship. This is a similar experience that I have also from the Israelis that I have been confronted with wherever I've been working. So they have some sort of common genes in terms of entrepreneurship. And that is really sort of coming from not only being intellectually capable, but also having the capability to dare and to try things and improve. So right now, for example, we're implementing here a platform that is called Saludo. It's a digital platform. And most of the engineers that have been helping us develop that platform in Germany actually came from Palestine. Some of them came directly from Palestine. So we also recruited people directly from Palestine. So for me, this capability is not only sort of related to people from Palestine being educated in Germany or in the UK or France, also people coming from Palestine, from the West Bank or from Ramallah Extra, they also have the same sense of entrepreneurship. And personally, as he mentioned, we have 1.2 billion people in Africa. And when I was looking at the program, I was asking myself, why is Jared also not spending a little bit of time in Africa and developing similar processes for us to be able to exploit and implement it? And I think that it is important for the people to be aware that, yes, you have 5 million people that are looking for opportunities, but there are many more people that are looking for opportunities across the globe. So for me, the sense of urgency is, yes, it's good to have visions, but it is extremely important to put it into practice because there are many people who are expecting for the same visions to be put into practice because a lot of people are waiting to be happier, to be much more connected to the world. And that's, for me, the opportunity that I see here to also voice that there are other people that are expecting the same thing. So it's not just a hope, it's also somehow an obligation for the people in this region to make it happen so that other people can come and work on the same chapter.
So, Sam, I'm going to get practical with you. And in the wise words of President Trump, let's talk jobs, jobs, jobs. So you perhaps are credited in helping to manage to oversee the efforts done here in Bahrain, which have managed to significantly reduce unemployment. I believe the numbers, if I'm correct, went down from 17% to about 4% in 11 years?
Yes.
So that is quite an achievement. Now, the reason why I said if we were to get practical, if you were appointed today to do the same in the Palestinian territories, of course, provided this plan goes forward, both parties are engaged, the number at the moment is 31% unemployment in Palestine. First of all, would you take the job? And second of all, how would you fix the problem?
Well, first of all, I'm well known to be a kamikaze, so I will take the job. But you know what they say. A pessimist is what an optimist calls a realist, and I'm a realist. To approach this, you have to look at it is doable, but you have to approach it with a lot of practicality. We've seen last night a very ambitious plan, but the dealings with the job seekers, with the demographic in Palestine, both territories, will have to be linked directly to the plan. Let me give you an example. Today, in the working age in Palestine, according to 2013 numbers, we're looking at 42% working age below 40 and 15% between 40 and 64. That makes 57% working age. Currently, they are idle, waiting without expectation. You're going to come up with a plan, a peace plan and an economic plan. You're going to raise their expectations. You have to prepare them. Otherwise, this could all go south. So basically, to approach this, you have to take into account the existing skills of the demographics broken down. For example, the age group between 40 and 64, they can take very little training at this stage. And quite frankly, at that age group, they have responsibilities. You can't take them off the labor market to train them. So these guys are going to have to work in the infrastructural projects, in the immediate 5-year projects that are coming out of the 10-year plan. The 15 to 39 will have to be trained in the short and medium-term economic development aspect of the plan. So services and manufacturing, for example. However, we have a real challenge. 40% is the remaining, which is below 15, out of which 23% are going to enter before the end of the 10 years, and only 7% are going to leave. So an additional 16%, taking the working age in Palestine in the next 10 years from 57 to 73%. That's a huge undertaking. So you can't leave the labor market to take a free fall. It has to be directly linked with the economic plan, has to be directly linked with the phases of the economic plan, and preparing the people, preparing how they enter the market, because they are an integral part of the peace. The people must be at peace, must have a future prospect, must look towards the future with some kind of hope in order for the overall plan to work. And that will only happen if you link the economic plan, which has to be a controlled one, with the population, phase by phase and demographic age group by demographic age group.
Amazing insight. I'll get back to that in a second, but I want to go back to Luis. Perhaps a good way to describe this workshop is it's a workshop about hope. So throughout your traveling, throughout your experience, perhaps maybe in your own home country, are there any examples so that people can relate to where, if I were to describe it, I would describe it as rags to riches example. Any cities, states, any similar situation that you perhaps have come across where we can just point at and say the Palestine can become like that?
Well, I'll give you 2 examples. In my home country in Colombia, the city of Medellin, which today was popularized by Hollywood as the whole
Escobar.
story of Narcos, which made a lot of money, I guess, for Netflix. Basically, is part of a story that was real in a city that had the highest crime rate in the world at one point, where people didn't know if they were going to live from one day to the next. Fast forward to today, and it's a city entirely transformed. It's one of the most innovative cities today in the world. It has its own Silicon Valley equivalent. The World Economic Forum's Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution just put a site there, the first of which is in Latin America. But the reason it worked was the commitment and the effort and the sacrifice of many people that want to see and wanted to see a new day in that city. And of course, it took a lot of courage. And much of the problem was that many of the young people, not unlike what happens in Palestine that you saw in Medellin, were young people who were killing for the cartel at the time, for the Medellin cartel. Fortunately, that story is gone. And today, you find a very different circumstance. Take another case, Haiti, which happened to be, after the United States, the first country in the Americas to get its independence. It was a country that basically led a lot of the independence movements throughout Latin America. It even defeated Napoleon's army, and that led to the fact that eventually the French had to sell Louisiana, which was then called the Louisiana Purchase. And I mention all of that because here you had a country that was very good, and then the politics and all the complexity that country took brought it really down. And in an island of Española, which is Dominican Republic and Haiti, which are population-wise about the same, you still see a lot of problems of development, largely because of many of the things that Osama was mentioning. You haven't had the capacity to really integrate all of these programs together. And this is the value of a program like this. Many times, when countries try to solve problems in isolated ways and the plan doesn't make them fit together, you will have increments that are at 1 millimeter at a time instead of 1 kilometer at a time. And this is where I think a plan like this is so central, because a lot of things have to come together to produce the kind of change that you need.
So I'm told the organizers are loving this conversation, so we've added a few minutes to the talk, which is great because I want to go back to what you were mentioning about India. So where I both agree and disagree with what you were mentioning earlier is, yes, India is obviously a continent, much bigger geography, a lot more people to manage. Perhaps different kind of problems, but you do not have the same geopolitical situation that the Palestinian people are going under. Are there any examples that you have from India where the state of Bahar comes to my mind, but you might have better examples where people were taken from being completely pessimistic to become believers, to become optimists, and what were the results?
So I think actually there are many examples in India, many smaller towns, cities where the young people were leaving those cities for the bigger urban centers. Let's take an example of Raipur, for example, a small place, small city, where there were terrorism, infiltration, Maoist problems, and so on. And the government there decided to make it a technology hub. And they started building an incubator, and they started giving certain privileges to young people in terms of ability to work together and education and so on. And today it's become one of the 3 or 4 most flourishing hubs for technology entrepreneurship in India, as an example. So I think the young people today look at the world very differently because they're really the first generation in a way to grow up connected to the net, connected to everyone on the planet in a totally different way. And I think that breaking of boundaries makes them look at the world as problems that are global problems. There may be local issues, local ways they can solve them, but they really start to look at the world as one world, one global opportunity. And I think that if people feel they're stuck in a small pond and the problem is just that problem, it's very debilitating. But I think the minute they can look at the broader problem and realize that it's not just their problem, actually there are problems all over the world people are dealing with, and that they can be a productive part of a solution with other people around the world to solve those things, I think it's very inspiring and uplifting. And so I believe that, of course, Palestine has a very particular and specific historical and political context that I'm not claiming we in India can really deeply understand or help solve in some unique manner. But I do think that there are lots of lessons from young people. And to me, the real issue is it starts with education. It starts with the education of young people, and not just in the sciences, but also in the values, in terms of values of ethics, values of altruism, serving others, values of leadership, with a concept of service in that leadership. And so our foundation now reaches 3 million young people, and the pillars of that foundation are teaching them about leadership with the responsibilities to be ethical leaders, to be altruistic leaders, and to take risk to solve problems. And so that's really what we do. And I believe we've seen some great small results, green shoots, and we'd be very happy to come and share our learnings in Palestine and this part of the world.
It's an excellent thought. Amadou, I would like you to follow up on that. So we have basically generations of young people who've lived without any gleam of hope. I'm sure that if they see a serious commitment from the private sector, companies such as DHL or others coming in and not just part of their CSR program, but as actual investment to help create better services, to help create better environment, it will look like it's a commitment from the international business community. My question to you is twofold. One, is your company, or as far as you know, the private sector in general, would they be willing to do such commitments, such as what we've just heard? And B, from your own personal experience, how would you go about, injecting hope into generations who've not felt any hope for decades?
Thanks. So, personally, I come from a small village called Kolda. It's in the south of Senegal. Probably you never heard of it. It's at the border to Guinea-Bissau. And it's a very small village. Still has no electricity. So that's where I come from, right? And one thing that I know from my own personal experience is that if you want to shape the future, it's nice to look at the rear mirror, but you cannot be concentrated backwards because you have to concentrate on what you want to shape and work on shaping it. And that is something that has to be somehow in the mindset of the people, because if you are just looking backwards, you will not be going fast, if you go at all, right? Second thing is, I think it is important, we have challenges across the globe in many different places. So I was based in Singapore, and then when we opened our operations in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and I saw how large corporations, because before Tony was talking about small and medium enterprises, but I also saw how large corporations moved their platforms from China into Vietnam and now are servicing the globe. And it created a lot of job opportunities. We also moved in and created logistics platforms so that even more companies could come in because they could serve companies and customers across the globe. So for us, our job is actually to create platforms so that somebody working in Mozambique or in Palestine can have customers in Medellin and get them served. Because today, the younger generation that is growing today, they know everything that is going on across the globe. They're not just interested in what is going on in their village. So their aspiration is to live the same nice life that you can find in New York or in Singapore or in Dubai or in many different places. That's the aspiration of every single individual. Now, how do you create that opportunity is by having, and that is really my conviction, by also having a leadership that has an aspiration to change the way people live in their own communities. And that is something that has to be done locally because we cannot decide it from outside. The people have to fight for that. And that is something that I see happening I have seen it happening in Asia. So I was in India multiple times. I've seen it happening in Southeast Asia, in Pakistan, in many different places. But also here in the region, I travel sometime in Basra. Basra is not an easy place.
Definitely not.
But when I see the young people that are working in our organization out of Basra, where we are now recruiting talents and exporting them to go and work in Germany in many different places, because they have the same smart, the same determination, the same vision and aspiration as people who are born in Berlin or many different places. So this is the same generation of people. So, and for me, it's just how do you open up opportunities so that people can fly in and fly out easily? How do you open up opportunities so that goods can move in, move out easily? Because then you're creating entrepreneurs that have opportunities that are just beyond the village, the city, and then they'll be fighting against everybody else. And then they're competing in the global world. So, and that is what I call inclusion, for me, myself. And now when it comes to investment, to attract investment, so you can go, and that's what I would suggest also for the Palestinian authorities, you can go and benchmark yourself like Saudi is doing it today with Vision 2030. They're benchmarking with Singapore, with Dubai, to become as efficient as these people. If you go here and come here in Bahrain, you look at the Bahrain Economic Development Board, they're doing the same thing. They're benchmarking so that they can become as efficient as all the other markets to attract investors. And everybody has to work and fight on the same premise. And that is not something that is for private sector to organize, but rather local authorities have to put the framework so that it is attractive for people to come in and invest. And if it is attractive to come in and invest, everybody will come. We know from our experience, and we're doing it just now in Abu Dhabi or in Tangier, when we come and put our logistics platform, all of our competitors, they come. And when they all come, then you have A, competitive prices and good quality. B, you have much more jobs that are created. C, you're giving good reasons for other industries to come and implement themselves, because then they know whatever they produce will be sold across the globe and it will move. And that's really what we try to enable.
Excellent. I want to go back to the person who's accepted the job to create to create jobs for Palestinians. If I were to compare, just to manage expectations, the situation between Bahrain and the Palestinian territories, one could argue that perhaps like the situation is in India, what applies to Bahrain doesn't apply to Palestinians, certainly not to the Palestinian territory, certainly not the geopolitics of it. But you know, as Muhammad Al-Abbar was saying yesterday, you know, in such situations, one doesn't expect the outcome. So perhaps we could be led to think that it might be difficult, but could we perhaps achieve results which are beyond expectations in terms of job creations in the Palestinian territories?
Yes. But we need to look at the historic context of post-conflict economies. It is unfair to compare the Palestinian territories to Bahrain, even at the height of our unemployment issue. We must look at it from the context of how post-conflict and post-war economies were rebuilt, such as in Korea past the Korean War. I think what they have now is a plan for 10 years, which is 2 5-year economic plans. If we stick to a tightly controlled economic approach for the first 2 5-year cycles, and then start to loosen it up into a market economy from the 3rd cycle all the way to an open market on the 4th cycle, and move the people's readiness, because you can't go from no economy to open economy overnight. Chaos will set in. You need to set the platform first. If they set the platform right when it comes to economic planning, when it comes to human capital planning, when it comes to the needs. If I am to look at, for example, the Indian example, and I've been following it closely since the mid-90s, I've been to India over 60 times to see how it goes, and my entire system in Bahrain is built by, my organization system is built by TCS. And I visited TCS, which is Tata Consulting Services, in their Hyderabad campus. One branch for one company hired 37,000 programmers. Wow. One branch. It's not the whole company, it's just their Hyderabad business. Now, India did not go overnight from nothing to this. There was a very detailed information technology plan. The person who was in charge of it reported to the Prime Minister directly. He passed away, rest in peace. He was a fantastic man. I met him personally. And they worked. They didn't care. For 10 years, they had a plan. After the 10 years, there was what is today the base of information and communication technology for the world. You must have a plan if you want to transform. There is the post-conflict economy, the transitional economy, and then the mature economy. Now, we can all aspire to the mature economy, but we won't get there unless we have a tight plan that links the administration with the economic development, with the human capital development. They have to go together. The Bahrain experience started in the transitional phase because, thankfully, we did not have to worry about a disastrous beginning. It was a good beginning that we had. But we realized where we were and where we were going, and that's how we reduced unemployment from 17 to 4% in 11 years. It was based on a plan and based on knowing what we had to deal with in Bahrain. So I think the best approach for this is to link the two together. Link the economic plan, because they obviously have a very good plan that we saw last night, and there is much more detail than the presentation said. But we must link it, link expectations, survey and understand the market right now. What are the skills that are available? What's the skill gap? How quickly can we bridge this gap in order for people to serve the plan and also to avail of the plan and create the hope that you were talking about?
So we have a few seconds left. I'm told I need to wrap up. I want to wrap up, first of all, by thanking all our panelists for not just creating hope, but telling us that it's achievable, provided that both parties agree to the plan, provided that a political solution is achieved. What we can conclude is it will definitely require a lot of work. It's going to require long hours, but the prosperity of the Palestinian people is achievable. And I would like to end this session with a final thought. This is the late Steve Jobs. Management is about persuading people to do things they don't want to do. However, leadership is about inspiring people to do things that they never thought they could. So, as a final note, let's all hope for a courageous, bold leadership that will do what's necessary on both sides to make this economic plan and the political plan possible. Thank you, everybody, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.